The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. Today on the program, we'll hear two stories about making a change in the environment. One on a systems level, and one about a community member trying to make a difference. The BC Community Forest Association gathered in Nanaimo for a 3-day conference this week. We'll have more on that in the second half of today's show. But first, Jim Senka says an experience in Northern Manitoba changed the way he looked at development and the environment. That story, which you'll hear him tell in just a few moments, helps explain why the 81-year-old sought out a community grant for habitat restoration in Chase River. This week, Nanaimo City Council approved that grant along with a number of others for watershed restoration projects. I got in touch with Senka to find out how the money will be put to use.
My name is Jim Senka. I'm a resident at Pacific Gardens Co-housing here in Harewood, and co-housing is a residential area where the residents own and manage and run the building our own way.
And you have spearheaded an initiative to get a grant from the city of Nanaimo, and I'm wondering if you could tell me what that's all about.
Absolutely. My life, I've gradually come from my experience to appreciate more and more how important it is to have a certain amount of wildlife habitat on this planet, and we're gradually have been destroying it. And so we have an opportunity here on our property to save some of that wildlife habitat, and we've actually designated about a third of it to remain natural and undeveloped. And then we'll appreciate the benefits, getting to see a lot of the wildlife right on our doorstep, kind of.
Yeah, could you give me more of a sense of what the place you live is, Pacific Gardens Co-housing, what the space is, and what the idea behind it's all about?
Absolutely. Our property was one of the original, they were called the 5-acre plots, I think, owned by the old coal company that was here in Nanaimo. And they were, the company gave 5 acres to each management person, I think, or employee. I'm not sure. And so it was an orchard for a little while. And then some people bought it in 2008 to build the co-housing project. On the property is there's about 9 old fruit trees that are still producing for us. About a third of it, as I mentioned, is wildlife, and it includes like a wetland pond and another ephemeral pond, which means it's dry part of the year, that drains into the Chase River, which is salmon bearing. I could go on and on. We have 13 Douglas fir that are about 300 years old. We've got hundreds and hundreds of Pacific chorus frogs. We've got over 40 species of birds that I've documented here, and it's a pretty neat place.
And you've got a grant for just over $7,000 for some habitat restoration in Chase River. Can you tell me what exactly are you planning to do?
Well, the big thing with urban development or highway development or anything, is the invasive plant species moving in, which really disrupts the natural habitat. So that's what has happened on our property, just like in anywhere else. So the short answer is that we plan to remove those invasive plant species and replace with native plants to make a nice home for the animals, basically.
Where did you get the idea to do this?
I think it comes from my career. I've got a degree in science, and I've spent most of my life involved with environmental restoration and environmental monitoring and environmental enforcement. So I've learned a lot about environment just through on the ground experience. And in this case, it was when we moved in here, it was really obvious that what was happening with the invasive species is having a negative effect. So I jumped right into it. And of course, there's a number of the residents here that also care very much. And so we've been working very hard at this.
Can you tell me what the application process was like to get this grant?
Yes, we have to describe exactly what the situation is here and basically what we're want to use the funds for. And also we have to demonstrate that we're doing work on its own as well. So we're doing a lot of the volunteer work, as well. So that's basically matching probably more than matching what the grant entails.
You were telling me before we started recording that one of the things you're really excited about is that you're going to be working with a company who's employee owned here in Nanaimo. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, we need to. That's mainly what the grant money is being used for, is to hire somebody to come in and help us out. And we've come across one of the neighborhood firm in the neighborhood called Yeoman's Tree Service, and it was particularly attractive to us because Yeoman's is a company that was bought by the employees from a previous owner, so that all the profits they make go directly to the employee, and to me that means a lot, and we support them as much as we can.
You were also telling me, Jim, that you're 81 years old. Can you tell me, what has got you motivated to do this project? What's the kind of why behind all of this?
Well, it's a bit of a long story, but I'll give you the short part of it. I at one time was like a lot of people on this planet, was all in favor of development and profits and expanding those kinds of things. And then I lived on the Churchill River, which was a First Nations community in Northern Manitoba. It was no roads in. And it was a completely self-sufficient First Nations community that supported themselves by trapping and fishing completely. Then, while I was there, with the provincial hydro flooded that lake and basically wiped out all means of support for that community. And now, whereas at one point there was no law enforcement needed, there was no welfare, none of that kind of stuff. Now a lot of them are on welfare, and there's drug and alcohol problems, and they completely ruined that community. So something just upstairs for me, it was an epiphany for me, really. And now I really care about how we look after the planet and the environment and our people.
You're living in Pacific Gardens. It's a co-housing space. From everything I can gather on the website, it's all about kind of a sense of community between the different families and people who live in this space. And I'm wondering if you could tell me if and how that's influenced this project that you've got the grant for.
Well, one of the nice things is that we support each other here at Pacific Gardens. It's co-housing means that we own the project ourselves, the condo ourselves. We run it ourselves. Nobody makes any profit out of it or anything. And because we support each other here, a lot of us do care about the environment and natural wildlife habitat. So it's pretty cool to be around fellow supporters of the environment, shall I say, and that. So it's worked out really well that way.
If there are people out there in Nanaimo who are, feeling a lot of the things you're feeling and you're talking about in this interview, and who would be interested in maybe taking this step towards taking some concrete action like you're going to be doing thanks to this grant, would you have any advice for folks in that situation?
Oh, boy. There's a lot that can be said. I think finding a way to have conversations with people that's non-confrontational. When I was younger, every time I brought something up, it would be that was confrontational, it just make things worse, kind of because of the approach. And there's a friendly way to approach that and talk, to speak with your friends about how important it is. And just if I could say just one thing about that I think is really important. We're all going to reach the end of our lives someday, and we're going to have at least a moment to look back and say, what did I do with that measly little 82 years or whatever that I did on this planet? And I think it's something we're going to want to be proud of, that we did with our time on, here on Earth. And so it's something to think about when you're younger, that, go out and do something you'll be proud of. And I'm not sure that means having 4 cars in your driveway and things of that nature. But, and there are numerous organizations that a person can be involved in. One of the ones that I particularly like is called Extinction Rebellion, and it's kind of an odd sounding name, but there's people that really care about the planet and we have a strong membership here in Nanaimo. So, but there's lots of organizations. Nature Nanaimo was another one. Nanaimo and Area Land Trust. There's all kinds of them, but getting involved, spending a little time as a volunteer and getting involved, I think, will be doing your part.
Is there anything else you'd like to let people know, either about this grant project or any of the things that inspired you to go down this road?
Well, I think like Vincent van Gogh used to say, go and look at nature. And when you look at it, you'll see how beautiful and important and soothing it is for you to have that opportunity to look at it. And the more you do that, the more I think a person realizes how you would like to maybe do something. You might want to do something about it to help out.
Well, Jim Senka, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Well, thank you very much, Joe, and the best of luck to you, and I wish to thank the CHLY as well for the good work that you do.
Jim Senka lives in Pacific Garden Co-housing in Harewood. The 81-year-old is leading a habitat restoration project in Chase River. This week, Nanaimo City Council approved a $7,000 grant for the project.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada and generous listeners like you. With your support, we can expand Midcoast Morning from 2 to 3 original programs per week to cover local news, current affairs, and arts and culture.
Figures from the world of community forestry came together in Nanaimo this week. The BC Community Forest Association held a 3-day conference and annual general meeting. A community forest is managed by a local government, community group, or First Nation, rather than a private company. I spoke with the BC CFA's executive director for more on the concept and for more on what brought the group to the Harbour City.
My name is Jennifer Gunter, and I'm the executive director of the British Columbia Community Forest Association.
Well, thank you very much for making some time to speak with me. What exactly is community forestry?
Yeah, so in British Columbia, as you may know, over 90% of the forest land is held by the province. Of course, the majority is unceded traditional territory, but we refer to it in our legal system as Crown land. And the province issues different kinds of licenses to operate on Crown land. And so a community forest agreement is one of those types of forest tenure or license. And so it's a long-term forest tenure that is issued to communities, and it's long-term, area-based, so it's for a designated area or fixed area, and it gives the community the chance to manage forests for their own values.
What percentage, roughly, of the forestry industry in BC currently falls under that umbrella of community forestry?
Yeah, so it's about 3 or 4% of the provincial annual harvest is made up of community forests right now.
And of that, how much is on Vancouver Island, or what is kind of the presence on Vancouver Island? Where are some of the community forests?
Yeah, so there are 7 community forests right now on Vancouver Island. Ones that are close to Nanaimo would be Port Alberni has a community forest. As part of our event this past week, we went down to a field tour of the Cowichan Tribes community forest. There's one called the Barclay Community Forest, which is in areas around Ucluelet. There's one in the North Island as well. And I'm probably forgetting that wasn't quite 7, but that gives you a sense of where they are. And provincially, we now have 62 operating community forests in the province.
What makes it different in practice than other ways of managing forests?
Well, the main thing is the fact that the forest license, or tenure as we call it, is issued to communities. So the community forest agreement can only be held by a local organization. So they can be issued to municipalities, First Nations, local community, nonprofit societies, and co-ops, and often partnerships. So we see many that are partnerships between a First Nation and a local government. And that's kind of one of the models that has really emerged in recent years as being the preferred way to go.
So if that's kind of 3 or 4% of the forestry industry right now, what's the other 96%? Who holds the licenses in those cases?
Yeah, so the majority are held by a few large companies that you're probably familiar with, like Interfor, Canfor, West Fraser, Western Forest Products, and those large companies hold the majority. And then we also have woodlot licenses and also First Nations woodlands licenses.
And so you were in Nanaimo for 3 days this week. You had an AGM, you had a conference. Why did you choose Nanaimo for that? And what were the things you were discussing here?
Yeah, so we're a member-based organization. So we're the BC Community Forest Association is kind of the industry association that represents all of these community forest initiatives around the province. And every year when we have our AGM, we organize a conference around that, and we travel to a different community in order to be able to spend time in community forests in different parts of the province. So last year we were up in Mackenzie, visiting the McLeod Lake Mackenzie Community Forest. And this year, it's been quite a few years since we've been on Vancouver Island. So we decided it was time to come back to the island. And we visited, as I said, the Cowichan Forest Services Community Forest down near Duncan on Monday. We had a full day of a field trip and also got to see the Forest Discovery Center. And then chose the Vancouver Island Conference Center as our venue because it was just a great place to accommodate all of our delegates.
Now, what is the pathway to a forest becoming a community managed forest typically? And part and parcel of that, are these typically kind of untouched forests, or are they sometimes forests that have been managed by other entities that kind of transition?
In the past, yeah, they're usually areas that have been managed in the past. You know, they're part of what we would call the timber harvesting land base. Many of them are second growth forests. Ideally, they're situated in the forest around communities because that really gives the community the ability to figure out how to manage for multiple values that the community might have. And the pathway is to be invited by the province to apply for a community forest. The tricky thing is, though, and this I might be jumping ahead to a further question, is the fact that all of the provincial harvest is already spoken for. And so to create a new community forest, you need to, government kind of has to figure out where that volume or AAC is going to come from. And which means ultimately someone has to give it up or taking it from someone else or buying it from someone else. So it's the forest land base is pretty constrained in the province in terms of forest operations. And that's one of the challenges that we're facing is our desire to grow the program and finding out what pathways exist in order to make that happen.
So you want to grow the program, and in order for the program to grow, we would either need to say collectively as a province, we're going to allow more trees to be cut down, or you would need to chat with someone who already manages a forest and like buy their allotment from them from a private company somewhere. And one of the issues you're working on is figuring out what are the opportunities and pathways to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's right. So more the second example you provided there of possibly being able to purchase harvesting rights from other licensees, that's one pathway. It's not so much about increasing the number of trees that we cut down. It's more about deciding who cuts them down. One of the maybe just a follow-up to that, the goals of the program include sustainability. So we really promote community forests as a strategy for healthy forests and ecosystem resilience. They do operate under the Forest Act and the Forest and Range Practices Act. So all the legislation and rules that govern forest management in the province also apply to community forests. But community forests get to put their own flavor on that management and decide what types of directions they want to take, what values they really want to see represented in that community forest. So for a lot of them, they are concerned about, as I said, forest health and ecosystem resilience. They're looking to create local jobs. They want to promote recreational use of the forest and cultural values. Half of the community forests in the province are held by First Nations or in partnership with First Nations. And so incorporating Indigenous science and knowledge and values in the management of community forests is a really important aspect of it.
Now, is my understanding that a ton of land on the southeastern half of Vancouver Island is in the hands of forestry companies. It kind of trickled its way there after it was part of a railway land grant a long, long, long time ago. And I'm wondering if that's an issue that's kind of on your radar and if there are folks looking at seeing if there's a way to maybe transition some of that land into community forest.
Yeah, and that's an interesting question. And what we learned on our field trip with Cowichan Tribes was the large percentage, the majority of the forest land base on southern Vancouver Island is private land. And so these types of forest tenures are just for what we call crown land, provincial forest land. And so there isn't at this time an avenue to create a community forest like we have today with that private land. So it is a constraint, and other parts of the province have way less private land, and so there's more opportunities to grow the program there.
The pathway to doing that in the case of like the land is private land would just involve, say, for example, the government or some nonprofit or some, other level of government essentially buying it back. That would need to kind of be a precondition.
Yes, I think that's correct.
The forestry industry, like any other natural resource industry in Canada, there's been a lot of talk lately about potential impacts of tariffs, and I'm wondering if there's anything special, any particular considerations when it comes to community forests of the impact of that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of concern. Community forests sell their logs on the open market, and they're trying to get the best value that they can, the best price for their harvest. And so, depending on where they are in the province, they may certainly be affected by, pressures on mills, curtailments, closures, even. And so, as the forest industry is squeezed by duties and now potential tariffs, that could certainly have an impact on the ability of community forests to sell their logs and get a good price for their logs. They're always trying to create economic benefits for their communities. I will say, though, that there's a lot of effort going in and interest in supporting local manufacturing and value added. and trying to diversify our sales and markets. So that was something that we talked about at the conference. And I think that community forests, because they're relatively small and they can be nimble, they have the opportunity to get more creative in terms of where they, who their customers are and what their future looks like.
What would you suggest is the kind of ideal path forward? What would you like to see happen and change in the kind of short to medium term?
Yeah, well, good question. And so when our new forest minister, Ravi Parmar, was first came into his position, the David Eby, Premier Eby, gave him a mandate letter. Every minister gets a mandate letter, and in Minister Parmar's mandate letter was the commitment to expand the community forest program. So we were really thrilled to see that become part of the provincial government's direction for the forest sector. And so now we'll be working with Minister Parmar to figure out how to make that happen.
Do you have a rough idea of what that could mean? We talked off the top about how community forests represent maybe like 3 or 4% of the forests in BC. Do you have like a target in mind you'd like to see them hit, or specific areas you'd like to focus on, either geographically or things like, say, old growth, etc.? Yeah,
sure. So the campaign commitment behind that mandate letter was to double the community forest program. That would be amazing. Ultimately, what we say is that we'd like to see a future where every community, Indigenous or non-Indigenous, that wants to steward the lands around it has the opportunity to get a community forest. So that's a long-term vision for sure. It's not going to happen quickly. In the short term, we're going to be looking at all the different avenues. So are there opportunities where there might be a willing seller and a willing buyer, like we talked about before, being able to purchase tenure? Could there be opportunities to partner with other folks that already have different kinds of licenses to make it into a community forest? And are there opportunities as well with partnerships that could come by working with BC Timber Sales? So we'll see. And then maybe there's other, more out of the box ideas that we haven't been thinking about yet, but it's an exciting time.
Jennifer Gunter is Executive Director of the BC Community Forest Association. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and RB Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
This program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Nanaimo First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.